So talking about power, does more power equal more headroom when we're talking about like amplifiers? So, some amplifiers may say, "Oh, this has 95 watts a channel, at 8 ohms, but 4 ohms, you get 120, 130, whatever." Does more power always equal more headroom, or what's the benefit of having, more power?
More delivered power equals more headroom. So, I mean, it's like you can have a car, like my motorcycle, I got a Goldwing. It's got 125 horsepower, 125 pound-feet of torque at idle to 6,000 RPM. I'm using maybe 20 to 30 pound-feet at any given time. So I've got all that extra room. I don't have all that extra power because I'm not using it. More power does mean the potential for more headroom, because essentially what you're listening to is a speaker that has a fixed level per watt output of acoustics, and the more power you put into it, the higher it goes until the speaker goes boom, and then it flames and everything's bad. Um, that's a big thing. So more power does help, but again, that's limited in what happens. Going from 80 watts to 100 watts, you're not going to hear the difference. Going from 80 watts to 130, 140 watts, you're probably not going to hear a difference. You really need to at least double the power to be able to say, yeah, I'm hearing it louder. Or actually even maybe quadruple the power before it sounds like, okay, now this is big time kind of a thing. And you also need to look at the impedance of your speaker. If you have an 8 ohm speaker, look at the 8 ohm rating of the amplifier. A lot of people are like, oh, look, I got this amp, it does, 250 watts output. I look at it, go, well, that's its 2 ohm rating. And you got an 8 ohm speaker. That means divide it by 2, that's 4 ohm. So now you're 125 divided by 2, that's 8 ohm, 60 watts. You got 60 watts a channel, dude. You're not actually going to get that. So typically you need to double the power to go, yeah, I hear a louder difference, or quadruple the power to go, okay, that's a big difference. Like subwoofers. When you stack 2 subwoofers, you get 3 dB increase. You doubled the power because now I got 2 amplifiers, right? And they're driving 2 speakers, which is another 3 dB. That's where you get the 6 dB, and that's where you go, hey, I hear a big difference. So more power does technically equal more headroom, the capability to get louder without compressing, but it's within reason. Going from 80 to 100 to 125 watts, or saying, well, your amp's only 130 and this is 150, the 150 is better. You know what? You're not going to hear a difference between them. 130 and 250, yeah, you will. But so keep it within range.
If this is your first time visiting the channel, why don't you consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification so you don't miss when I upload new videos just like this. And I want to say a big thank you to my Patreon members. And if you're not a Patreon member and you want to consider subscribing to that, then I'll leave a link in the description where you can check that out. This video is in partnership with Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network, and they keep costs low because they sell direct to you online, cutting out the retail stores and salespeople. So why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Click the link in my description or scan the QR code if you're interested in the best value in wireless.
Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, owner of Mint Mobile. Enticing, right?
What are the advantages of using separates over just, let me buy this receiver, it's got 13 channels crammed into here? Like, what's the benefit?
95% of the benefit is a better power supply. Just being blunt, a better dedicated power supply. People don't realize an amplifier, all it is a valve on the output of your power supply. The better your power supply, the better the quality of potential you have. You can think of power supply as like the water main coming from the street, from the city, whatever like that. And the amplifier is just basically a valve that shuts on and off things like that. In a big receiver, there's only so much space you have in there, right? There's only so much power you could do with that thing. And there's only so much heat you could dissipate out of it. And so usually, well, I'm going to have multiple channels of amplification. I'm going to make a small power supply. And that means that power supply, yeah, they're going to rate it at 1,000 watts, but realistically, it's probably going to be about 200 to 300 watts continuous before it starts to pull too much power and starts to sag. So when you pull too much power from an amplifier, it doesn't, from a power supply, it doesn't shut the power supply off. What happens is the voltage rail, like let's say it's plus or minus 30 volts, starts to sag down. So when you're pulling lots of power, it's no longer 30 volts. It maybe goes down to 25 or 24 volts before it eventually shuts off. What that means is the headroom capabilities are reduced, because instead of being able to swing up to 30 volts, you now only swing to 24. And well, if you're trying to get to 30 volts, guess what? You go boop and you clip. So that's a big problem. So when you have a single shared power supply that's kind of small amongst all these channels, if one channel starts to clip, starts to sag it down, all the channels clip and start to sag it down. So when you go to a dedicated amplifier, number one, I've got usually multiple power supplies now powering it, like, a pair of Fiera 4s or a couple 8s or whatever like that. And so if one starts to start to get drugged down, number one, you're playing it really loud because that's a monstrous power supply in there. But it's only going to affect the channels in that unit. It's not going to affect the other ones. They still have their own independent power supplies still going. That was one of the cool things we did, like with the A7. They were all discrete power supplies on each channel. So if you railed one channel super hard and pulled a ton of power from it and started to suck it down, only that channel was affected. It wasn't the other ones. So that's really what you're getting with separates. That's why they tend to sound better. You just got more space, dissipate more heat, better power supply inside of it. It's just a better overall experience. And again, you could build that into receiver, but you end up with a 12U high receiver with a big old power supply in it, which is, okay, just get separates. Yeah. And you're probably better off overall with functionality too. Like, I'm a big fan of the original design of what we used to do way back in the day, when stereo was still kind of new, because I'm that old. You had an amplifier, you had a preamplifier, you had a source. And it should be kind of that way, in my opinion, too. In other words, the receiver, instead of doing all this fancy stuff, just make it like basically a decoder. Don't worry about the amplifiers in it. And don't worry about using it as a source. Use another device for your source. Get a streaming box. Most of us probably have like a Roku or something onto our TV, and we use that to go into the AVR and go out from that. Use a separate amplifiers. So again, you got source, preamplifier, processor, and amplifier. Just 3 separate parts, 3 different sets of components. You're done. More!